All right, hi there, everyone. Welcome to Bleav in Bills, the Wednesday edition. Adam Bonini, WGRZ TV, Sal Mayorana, Rochester, Democrat and Chronicle, and with us for the second time here on the show. Vic, your resume is too long and distinguished to hit all of the highlights, but a long-time Buffalo News on the Bills beat and columnist. Obviously, SiriusXM NFL Radio. We do Sports Talk Live together Monday nights on Channel 2. And Sal and I thought, given all that's going on with this team right now and with the opponent this coming week, that maybe a chorus of voices might be the approach to take here. And that might not be enough.
It might not be enough. I feel like you guys pulled me in from the field. This is like an emergency edition and, two-game losing streak, crisis all over the place. Yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah,
we've all been through a few times like this, right, Sal?
Yeah, I think a few, right, Vic? We've been. Let's see. I was there not as a full-time guy, but during 83, 84, 85, I was in that locker room. Those were great days, weren't they, Vic?
Woo! Those were the kind of days where you were making full-fledged plans, like well before Thanksgiving and Christmas, of what you were going to be doing in the off season other than covering the Bills in the playoffs.
Yes. Great days.
All right, so we're going to get it going here. First, a word from the sponsor. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Head to the website today to get into the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right, so, gentlemen, where do we begin? I mean, obviously, they win the first three games. Quality of competition, quality of opponent. In hindsight, obviously, we have a different view of that than when we started the year. But now these last two games, particularly disturbing, and that involves both players' execution and obviously coaching. We're going to get to all of that with the Bills first. Then we'll talk about what's happening down in New York ahead of the Monday night matchup. I'll start generally with you, Vic. What is wrong with this Bills offense?
Yeah, it's a list, and let's start in the obvious place. The quarterback isn't playing like the guy who, we Bleav plays far better than what he's shown, especially in these last two games. I'm not entirely sure his whole 5-week or 5-game body of work reflects the best of what we've seen, even though, yes, he was player of the month or offensive player of the month to begin the season, and deservedly so. But a lot of that was, the cape that he put on, that heroics from that Arizona game. And yeah, he had some good numbers through and against through 3 games against very shaky opponents, to say the least. But what we've seen the last 2 weeks has been a drastic shift away from Josh Allen, who can carry a football team. And we have felt from day one needed to carry this team much more than he has in the past. And then the receivers who struggle to get open. That was a theme from day one. Again, Allen running for those 2 touchdowns, throwing for those 2 touchdowns. And my feeling was that's a model for what you're going to have to see game in and game out. And the offensive line that does not sufficiently protect Josh Allen and forces him on the move. But when he's on the move, again, we've seen him make those plays. And is he not making them because guys aren't getting open? Is he not making them because he's not doing his part to put the ball where it needs to be, et cetera? Find them, make the right reads. And then there is Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator. There's a lot on him, well beyond the questions that can be raised about play selection at the end of that Houston game. Just in general, is he doing enough to make this offense work, put the creativity in there? I couldn't help but think of him as I'm watching that Kansas City game Monday night against New Orleans. The Chiefs figure it out. They are not a barn-burning offense by any stretch the way we've seen them be. But what is happening? Coaching is rising to the occasion. They're creative. They're finding ways to make the most out of what they have to make those plays. And I'm not suggesting Brady's got to suddenly transform into Andy Reid, but they need better than what they're getting.
I think Vic hit on two really important points here that I think some people kind of overlook at times. The offensive line has been a good run blocking unit. They've actually run the ball pretty well. And I'm surprised. I was surprised to see the numbers that they're running on like 58% of first downs, which is really completely different from what they did under Brian Dable and Ken Dorsey for sure. And they're still finding success on first down, and they're averaging, 4.5 yards a pop. So they're moving the ball on the ground sufficiently enough. But as we've seen in these last two games, guys, this offensive line has really struggled to pass block. He is running for his life, Josh Allen, way too much right now. And while we all think it's great that he runs for his life because he usually turns those plays into first downs because he's so good at scrambling, at some point, as we saw in Houston when his head is banging down on the ground and concussing him probably, this is not a model for success, as Vic said. So the offensive line, they have got to figure this out. And Adam and I have talked about this since day one, moving on from Mitch Morse, bringing in David Edwards, who's a backup player, and all of a sudden this is your starting left guard. And then Torrance has been kind of bad. After a solid rookie season, he's kind of been pretty bad. So that's one big point. The other big point is coaching. Vic, you're absolutely right. Joe Brady, for whatever reason, look, you've got receivers on this team. They're all NFL players. They've all had a little bit of success here or there. He is not finding ways to get these guys open. And at some point, they've got to be able to beat somebody in coverage, right? Somebody's got to do something. Curtis Samuel has been running pass routes for 8 years. MVS has been doing it for, I think, 6 or 7. They got to find ways to get these guys open, and Brady is failing in that regard. It's all been Josh Allen, drop back, hope somebody gets open, and then deliver the ball. And that's not how you play efficient offense, especially in the pass game.
Well, I mean, it's about, in a lot of ways, right, especially early in the season, what you put on film and what the Ravens game and the Houston game have told future opponents. And they've shown a template, right? And it's pretty straightforward at this point. Sal, you mentioned the pass blocking. Pressure Josh Allen to the best of your ability. You're able to generate that type of pressure, get him off schedule. And the receiving core, as it's constituted right now, these guys aren't getting open. That's your formula to beat the Buffalo Bills, and we've seen it clear as day the last 2 games.
But that goes to coaching. I understand physically these guys have not been good enough to separate and get open. So doesn't your coaching have to figure out route trees to get these guys open? Figure out what they're doing. Figure out what the defense is doing to stop them and counterpunch. Give these guys different routes to do something.
I tend to believe that most of what you're saying, Sal, is correct. But coaching, let's expand that. I don't know that it stops at design, at play design, route concept, the game plan, etc., and differentiating, opponent to opponent, what it is that they do to take it away. As Adam says, there is something of a template. Now that's a blanket term that we often use, and it's probably overused because every team, it's a proprietary game plan that you have, of course, and based on the types of players you have defensively and just as it works offensively. But I will say that I will add this. You said these are experienced NFL receivers who have run routes before, who suddenly didn't forget how to do it. However, no one in this group scares defenses or makes defensive coordinators worry about how are we going to take player X away. And it starts there. They can press their defense and can create a circumstance where their coverages, their pass rush, all of what they want is on the table available. Those things are generally reduced when you have someone who can, Stephon Diggs, let's use that name I'm talking about, in a Bills uniform over the time he was there, that altered how defenses played. They have nothing close to that on this team right now. And it was stark contrast that we saw in that Houston game, or a Nico Collins, or, go through the names. What they've done is put a bunch of guys together who have that experience. And then they've asked Josh Allen to be not just, Superman jump over defenders. I'm talking about Josh Allen, the quarterback, the franchise quarterback, whose job is elevate, make something out of these guys, find them, throw them open. You do it and be the best quarterback you can be. And therein is part of where this coaching concern I have too, Sal, is he getting all of that done, accomplished? Did they do enough to figure out how much more he can do in his individual play to make these guys more effective?
Well, we're by no means done talking about coaching as we continue here in the show. We're going to get into that, but relative to the points you've both made, and I think, you can include the tight ends as part of this discussion as well, obviously. So the question becomes, and Vic, we talked about this Monday night on the show, do they sort of knee-jerk react and get involved and look to make a deal for one of these upper echelon receivers to try and, speak to the issues that both of you have raised concerns about?
I don't see that. I mean, certainly they could, and I would never, saying never with Brandon Beane on a move is silly, because he's proven that he'll do things, always wants to make the team better. Okay, but a dramatic move at this point, given their salary cap circumstance, is that when you think more longer term, is that wise? Does that make sense? I would be more inclined to think their desperation to do this. Let's use the Jets as a comparison here, where Davante Adams' name gets attached, largely, obviously, because of Aaron Rodgers' history with him. But that's a desperate program that's already fired its coach. The GM is probably going to be out the door eventually, in this season or after the season. They're going to be blowing things up there. I don't see a blow up coming here. I see this team having taken a calculated or intentional step back because of the cap. Those names that they let out the door, they step back on purpose, but with the idea that they can reload more going forward after this year. You do this now, to me, that's like, do Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, are they that concerned and worried about their jobs that they have to bring this guy in with the notion that your fan base will have, this guy will get them to the Super Bowl? Are they one receiver away from that? And I'm not buying that.
No, neither am I, Vic. We knew with the guys that they let go this year in the offseason, this was going to be not the same Bills roster. They were not going to be able to retool this roster with one draft class, and then the salary cap issues kind of prevented them from doing a whole lot of damage in free agency. So we knew anybody who was smart and understood what was going on, and I'm talking about fans too, had to realize that this was not going to be a breeze for the Bills this year. It was going to be, like you said, probably a little bit of a step back, with the intention to continue to push for a division title, because this division is not great. So the Bills, as presently constituted, can still win this division. I do believe that. But to go out and get Davante Adams, that is never going to happen, at least as far as I can tell, because of the salary cap and because they just let Stephon Diggs walk out the door. You got rid of one diva making $30 million a year. Why would you want to jump right back in bed with a guy who's 2 years older than Stephon Diggs? If that was the plan, then they should have just kept Stephon Diggs in the building. Why would you do this now? So Davante Adams is not coming to Buffalo. Now, one name that I would keep an eye on, Vic, maybe two names, Amari Cooper for the Browns, as their ship sinks further and further. He's got a much friendlier contract. It's possible they could do that. And the kid down in Carolina, Deontay Johnson, is a guy that might be able to fit. Dan Morgan's down there. Him and Bean might get on the phone and say, hey, that's a guy they could fit in the cap who could make a difference for this team too. But all this Davante Adams talk, come on, people, that's not going to happen.
Okay, so let's get back to the coaching part now, because I think we've all agreed. Vic, when you were on the show before the start of the season, we talked about the fact we all acknowledged and saw it, from miles away, they are transitioning this roster. relative to the salary cap. Kind of the pains of the last couple of weeks are obviously part of that process. I think the points are well taken on coaching from a game planning and strategic and creativity standpoint. There's also the in-game decision narrative, right? Relative to what we saw on the final possession down in Houston, and the Texans wind up winning the game-winning field goal. We all know what went down there, and I think fans who follow this team know that extends a trend, right, under Sean McDermott, of these types of breakdowns at key moments and key situations. And so the national narrative is, can this team, can this franchise win a Super Bowl, win a championship with Sean McDermott as the head coach? I would like to think the answer to that question is yes, based on how closely we've covered this team and all that he and Brandon Beane have done to elevate this program. But I think the growing list of examples of these types of breakdowns legitimately raise that question. I'm just wondering, I'm not suggesting the McDermott seat is hot. I don't think that's the case at all. Where do things stand, though, as far as McDermott and this leadership structure with this team in light of what took place last week down in Houston in that context?
I think the question is fair to bring up and discuss. I by no means see Sean McDermott having even a lukewarm seat, let alone a hot seat. I mean, he's the head coach of this team going for the foreseeable. And I would say right now, confidently, that his contract runs through 27. And I don't see a reason to alter that plan. Now, I'm going to add to that everything you brought up, and why is it fair? The trending of game management, clock management, the fact that it's happened multiple times, and the fact that it's starting to stick to his resume, and it's on a list. It's on a list. I mean, people are going to remember this Houston game for one series, even though it took much more than that to ultimately result in the loss. 13 seconds hovers heavily over Sean McDermott, and I think that was the time when you talk about what can they win a Super Bowl. Well, they were built, I think, at that moment. I don't know that anyone would argue that team had Super Bowl all written all over it, and those 13 seconds got in the way. This is each situation, each season, different. This is not, I don't think, we've just established, I think, the possible step back or the likely step back. The roster is not that of a Super Bowl team. So can coaching overcome that? I think it's a challenge. Anytime you see a great or talk about a great coach, Hall of Fame coaches, let's include Marv Levy in the discussion because he is in the Hall of Fame. They have Hall of Fame players who are on those rosters, great coaches and have great players. Right now, I would, can we say Sean McDermott has a roster of great players? No, not even close. He's got potentially a great quarterback. He's got a really good one. He's not playing great, but we think he's got greatness in him, and he's shown greatness. So I think, I'm going to qualify him as great, but I'm going to look at the rest of this roster and say, what else is there that can say this roster is built to win, and the only thing that can get in the way is poor coaching? I would not say that.
This roster, to me, Vic and Adam, is probably on par with 2018, the end of it, and then 2019, the early part of it. That's about where we are with this roster, with one big exception. Josh Allen is now a superstar, and he can take this particular roster and still win games and perhaps still win a division, where back then he couldn't do that. But talent-wise, top to bottom, that's where we're looking at. This is nowhere near the team it was since 2020 through 2023, not even close. So is this team good enough? Can Sean McDermott get this team over the hump? I think he can. And like you said, his seat is not hot in any way, shape, or form. It's not even lukewarm. He has got enough here where he can get this team to the playoffs, and he's a good enough coach, and people need to get off this bandwagon of you got to fire Sean McDermott. You need to stop, because that is not the problem. Look at the defense that he's put together, even in this season, when they've lost so many guys outside of the Baltimore debacle. And all the injuries they've had, this defense has played pretty well, guys. This defense almost won them that game last week against Houston. That's his bailiwick, right? Defense is what he coaches. So what he needs to do maybe is find an offensive coordinator who can do something better than Ken Dorsey and maybe Joe Brady. I mean, he had Dable, and that was great. But I'm not convinced on Brady yet. I certainly wasn't convinced on Dorsey. Maybe that's what he needs to do is get the right offensive coordinator.
And I just want to insert here. I wonder just the process of going from transitioning from Dorsey to Brady. Like let's look at the Cleveland Browns. Let's bring the Browns into the conversation because that is where Dorsey is now. And they previously had Alex Van Pelt, and a lot of folks. And I had worked for that team. Have a lot of connections there. The conversation there was that Van Pelt, like it wasn't such a drastic thing that they had to replace him, and people were kind of scratching their head as to why it ended up being Van Pelt out and then Ken Dorsey in. I look here, we understood this offense was at a precipice, was at a bad place after that Denver loss and the way things were going offensively and Josh's game and everything else. So we understood the move. And yes, for the in-season purpose of it, putting Brady there. But how did it go from there? Like, were they that convinced? There was a lot of positive elements to what Joe Brady did with the offense in that second half of the season. But I still maintain the season was saved largely, as Sal just mentioned, by that defense, that injury-ravaged defense that Sean kept together with not only the structure, the play calling, signal calling, all that he did. And then you get into a new season. It's a different slate. Teams have a better feel for what they're dealing with Joe. And was it a matter of convenience, keeping him aboard and just letting him keep the job? Did Josh Allen say, look, I'm comfortable with this guy. What do you think, Josh? I'm comfortable with this guy. Let's just stick with him. I don't know. And I don't know if a bigger search did they do that? Were there other candidates that they should have been pursuing? I don't know. I feel like the effort to get a guy to do the job, and to our point here, and I'm not putting all the failure of the offense on him, but he's culpable. He's culpable. He's part of it, accountable. He's part of the reason. And I have to believe at some point there's a thought that, was this the right move?
I'm not going to dispute any of what either of you just said about either side of the ball. I will say this, though, that, the will learn from it mantra from Sean McDermott in light of that final possession and just taking 16 seconds off the clock on 3 straight incompletions. I mean, that's starting to ring hollow as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not going to look past that and cast it aside. I have a legitimate concern about, and I've said this through the years in our coverage as well, as each example of this is kind of mounted, and obviously Sunday did nothing to offset my feelings on that issue. So it's something I think I'm going to carry and take a good hard look at. I mean, it's a check mark against him right now, fully acknowledging everything else that Sean McDermott has accomplished. I want to get to this matchup quickly with the Jets. And before we get to the situation down there, Sal, you're at practice today. Obviously, you're with us from the field house at One Bills Drive. Injury list, not practicing today. James Cook, with a foot and toe. Shakir, again, with a ankle. Oliver, the hamstring. Samuel, the foot and the toe. Limited. Taron Johnson and Austin Johnson. Taylor Rapp, some good news, has cleared concussion protocol. And Darrington Evans returned from IR, so back in that particular mode. And Josh Allen maintaining that he is healthy, that everything was resolved in the medical tent down in Houston before he came back in the game when his head hit the turf. Any takeaways for you from that list and what went on and what the narratives were at practice today?
Yeah, well, here's one good piece of news. I talked to Taron Johnson after practice, and he kind of gave me the indication that he'll be good to go. I mean, it was close last week, he said. I was looking at his forearm today, and he's got it wrapped with some type of plastic protective device. And I asked him, right now it's just basically a pain issue, a tolerance of pain. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, can you hurt it anymore. And he said, not really. He said the biggest issue for him, and it isn't even so much wrapping up and tackling. He said it's getting off blocks, getting leverage if a tight end's coming at him or whatever. That's the only real issue that he has left. So I get the sense that he'll be back, and he really is a guy they have to get back in there. Cam Lewis, look, nice story. UB, I love it. Great. He's getting killed. He's been one of their worst players on defense in these 2 losses. So they got to get Taron Johnson back. Shakir, I don't know. It's an ankle injury. He's not practicing today. I really can't give you a sense. And then the Curtis Samuel, James Cook stuff, that was new. I mean, that did not come up on Monday on the Zoom calls. All of a sudden, they both have a similar foot-toe. That's kind of what Mcdermott said. So I'm not sure if that's maybe turf toe, which we know is problematic. Samuel has already dealt with that. And if James Cook has that, guys, and if that's a problem, that's a big problem for this offense because he has been kind of a go-to guy so far. So, it was not outside of Taron Johnson probably being ready to play. It was not a good day for the injury status, I guess.
Well, I would go to what you said about Taron Johnson and how much of a difference he makes when he's in there and when he's healthy. We'll see what type of or what version of Johnson you get for this game because there's no minimizing the fact that he's got, like you said, maybe a plastic thing, protective wrap, whatever, on that forearm. And if it was bad enough to keep him out when he was a questionable player last week, it's something to look at this time around. Even though he's indicating to you that he thinks he'll be good to go, they need it. But the Cook thing, when I saw that, I said, okay, this changes. My view of this game is the Bills' best chance starts right there. The Jets' run defense is vulnerable. Of all the good things you could say about the Jet defense, and that's pretty much the best thing you could say about their team and has been for these recent seasons. That's not one of them. And the Bills, if they're not able to exploit that with Cook, as Sal recited those early down stats, that's a problem. You're putting more pressure, I think, on Allen in the passing game, and pressure that I don't know that it can handle so well.
All right, so we'll get to the Jets now, and I don't know how far either of you want to get into everything that's happened down there with the firing of Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers taking a lot of heat from that, and all the politics and everything off the field associated with that. Feel free to address it. But the simple fact of the matter is that both of you would agree that this is a Jets defense, particularly in the secondary, that the Bills have had issues with in the past. And in light of everything that we talked about, and do they get sort of a one-game bump with a coaching change, as we've seen in some situations in the past, as they head in a Monday night primetime game down at MetLife? I mean, how does all of that kind of fuse together, and how much of a challenge is this for Buffalo on Monday night? I think it's a pretty steep one.
I think the Jets have kind of hit the panic button here by firing him. I mean, if they win this game, they're in first place. I mean, I get there's got to be a dynamic going on there. It's clear that Rodgers and Saleh were not seeing eye to eye, and it looks like Aaron Rodgers is calling the shots down there. So I think it's kind of a panic move. I don't know that it was necessary. He is a defensive coach like McDermott, and their defense has been really good. So I'm a little bit puzzled by what's happening. It just kind of proves that, like I said, Rodgers is calling the shots. In terms of the Bills going against this defense, James Cook has to play. They have to run the ball because these two corners on the outside, DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, they're probably the best tandem in the NFL. I think PFF has DJ Reed as their number one graded cornerback. Not that I believe totally in PFF's grades, but there is some context there. These guys are pretty good. It's going to be a very, very difficult challenge. I do have some numbers on the one-game bump. It's amazing. In the Super Bowl era, I couldn't believe when I saw this. Only one team in the Super Bowl era that changed its coach midstream made the playoffs. That was 2021 when Bisaccia took over for John Gruden with the Raiders. The only time. And then in the first game bump, I went back to 2010, and it's 16-13. The team won the game. Now, here's the key part of that, though. Generally, when you change coaches, your team sucks, right? So to win 16 and lose 13, that's kind of impressive. And the Jets aren't even in this category as far as I'm concerned. The Jets are still a competent team. So I think that one game bump could really be a factor in this game, guys.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I'm a believer that there is something about the juice and whatever comes about when you make that change. You change the voice of who's in charge. You create urgency. Definitely a whatever you want to call it, a panic move, desperate move by this organization, but one that in terms of its timing does make sense, because all of a sudden they found themselves on their ride back from London after losing to the Vikings with a chance to win a game and be in first place by themselves. It may be the only good thing that happens in their season, to date, but certainly beyond that, who knows? And yeah, you got Aaron Rodgers with a bum ankle, so we'll see how that affects things and the Bills' ability to get pressure on him. We know what happened the last time. But Jeff Ulbrich, this is what else I know, who is the interim head coach, who had been the DC, is as competent. Someone within that organization told me that he was the most competent coach in the building, and that included Saleh, in terms of a guy who has the respect of not only the players, the organization. Whether he is head coaching timber, we'll see. That's uncertain. It'll be a different role. He's not necessarily used to being the front guy, but in his role as the cap turned backwards, he's got that baseball cap backward guy running a defense. There's tremendous respect, and picking someone from that side of the ball, their strength, also something to think about. Where it will be very interesting is how the play calling is handled, and that was part of this controversy, the discussion that was Saleh ready to move on from Nate Hackett as play caller or even as OC. That to me is going to be interesting, because where the Bills can have an edge, this team does a horrible job in pass protection, and it's not just the incompetence of the O-line. I think it's the way they block or don't block. This team doesn't motion. This team doesn't do a lot of things that you see teams that are, creative, inventive do to help the quarterback, help a 40-year-old, not so mobile quarterback, stay upright. So you got to think about that and getting guys open. But that defense is for real. And if nothing else, I think this is one of those games where, coaching is going to matter, because late game decisions, clock management, because I have a feeling it will be down to the wire.
All right, so all that gets put to the test again. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to get much more into the matchup. We're right back at it here in Bleav in Bills, tomorrow, meaning Thursday. Diana Rossini is going to be joining Sal and she is, of course, formerly with ESPN, is now the lead NFL insider for The Athletic, and based right there in New Jersey, the New Jersey, New York area. So she's right in the middle of all of this, and will have more perspective on what's happening off the field with the Jets and in the front office and on the field as well. So always a pleasure to roll with both of you. Sal, we'll see you for that recording on Thursday. And Vic, it's nice to do this without the TV producers chirping in our ears a little bit, giving us the time cues and telling us to wrap it up, isn't it?
It's a different feel, but I'm with my guys here, my veteran teammates flanking me here. Seeing Sal in the field house is the best. I just love that. That's a great scene.
And we're very proud that Vic's resume can now add first two-time guest on the Bleav in Bills podcast.
That's right. We'll park that right next to inductee for the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame this year. Congratulations on that again, Vic. That's coming up, I think, November 12th.
November 12th at the Buffalo Convention Center. Looking forward to that. We got a lot of family and friends coming in from my wife's telling me the list is growing. So I got a feeling credit cards are going to be annihilated as we host all these people coming to town.
I'll certainly look forward to celebrating with you. that night. All right. So for Sal Majorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, Vic Carucci, WGRZ TV and Sirius XM NFL Radio, I'm Adam Benini, Channel 2 Buffalo Sports Talk Live. Thanks for being with us here on Bleav in Bills.